Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, COVID-19 and the Green Economy Youth Engagement for Regional Success. I trust that you and your loved ones are all safe during these uncertain times and that everything is going well. I'm Yasmina Omari, Executive Director of the Pearl Initiative. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. We are holding this in collaboration with the Global Compact Network UAE and the World Green Economy Organization. Thank you to our collaborating partners once again for their support on this. Before I delve into the theme for today's webinar, I would like to take this opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Pearl Initiative, and we'll hand over to Rachel Pineno in a moment to also introduce our collaborating partners. PI was developed in cooperation with the United Nations Office of Partnerships. It was launched in September 2010 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. It is the region's leading independent non-profit organisation committed to supporting the private sector in proactively taking a lead in adopting higher standards of corporate governance, transparency and accountability in order to enhance business competitiveness and value creation. With its growing network of partner companies, the Pearl Initiative is committed to driving collective action, exhibiting decisive leadership and sharing of knowledge and experience to positively influence regional business and student communities. Throughout today's webinar, COVID-19 has not only impacted businesses, but the impact has been felt across all aspects of our economy. With the economic turmoil caused by the pandemic, it is clear there will be serious repercussions for all industries. As all institutions begin returning to work, what challenges have they faced as a business to ensure their core stakeholders will not suffer? Has the ability to adapt quickly to the pandemic shed light on their operations? Further to that, has the pandemic had any influence on the importance of educating younger generations on resiliency and the climate energy emergency we are facing? Is there even more urgency for our youth to follow climate change specialisations? In a conversation with leading Gulf business representatives, we will unite leading Gulf business representatives by showcasing the new norms for institutions and the practices they have implemented to ensure their business continuity during this pandemic, highlighting the need for agility and collaboration in order to be resilient in times of uncertainty, and discussing the importance of educating young people on sustainability and climate change to ensure our future business leaders are well versed in the subject matter to combat the global climate emergency. I'm pleased to introduce our expert moderator and panelists for today. Once again, thank you so much for giving up your time and imparting your knowledge and expertise with us today. Our moderator for today is Dr. John Katsos. John is Associate Professor of Management at the American University Sharjah, UAE, where he teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in business ethics and social responsibility, social entrepreneurship, negotiations, and business law. John researches business and human rights in conflict zones. He looks specifically at how businesses can mitigate political risk and enhance peace and human rights in conflict and post-conflict zones. Our panelists for today are Asha Alexander and Melanie Harwood. Asha Alexander is the principal at GEMS, the Kindergarten Starters, Dubai, and the executive leader of climate change at GEMS Education. She received her Masters of Science in Educational Leadership from the Walden University, Minnesota. Ms. Alexander is a UN-certified climate change leader and has made presentations at COP25 and numerous other international webinars and conferences, and has conducted workshops on leadership and change management for several schools of India and the UAE. Thank you for joining us, Asha. Last but not least, our final panelist with us today is Melanie Harwood. Melanie is an education entrepreneur and self-styled disruptor based in England. As the co-founder and CEO of Educate Global, a not-for-profit organisation, she has partnered with the United Nations to educate teachers and in turn the next generation about climate change and sustainability. Her unorthodox approach ultimately aims to create an army of Greta Thunbergs by the thinking that teachers don't just teach children, they teach entire communities. Melanie's personal mission is to deliver the future leaders our planet desperately needs right now. Before I hand over to Rachel, the panel is set up to be a conversation between John and Asha and Melanie, and we will set aside 15 minutes at the end of the discussion for questions from the viewers. As with all our webinars, we do like them to be as interactive as possible, and we invite you to ask any questions you may have pertaining to the topic during the session using the platform's Q&A tool on the right of your screen, and they will be routed through to the panelists accordingly. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I will now hand over to Rachel Pineno, who will give you a brief overview of the UN Global Compact local network in the UAE, as well as the World Green Economy Organization, our partners supporting the delivery of this panel here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin, for the introduction, and thank you to the participants for joining this session. By way of a quick introduction, the World Green Economy Organization is a multi-stakeholder organization consisting of platform members from cities, public sector authorities, private and financial sector companies, academic institutions, and youth, all of which are engaged in green economy-related practices, activities, and issues. The organization seeks to promote the widespread acceptance and increased importance of green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. The Global Compact Network UAE is hosted by the World Green Economy Organization. The local network aims to mobilize the UAE's private sector to align to both the UN Global Compact's 10 principles and the SDGs through various programs, task forces, and activities in relation to key priority areas. Facilitating the collaboration and communication between businesses and non-businesses, the local network looks to provide a platform for dialogue to occur. I would now like to pass on to John to start the session, and I look forward to the interesting discussion had today between our speakers. Thank you so much.
So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction from both Yasmin and from Rachel. My job here is just going to be to try to moderate, and then I'll add my 2 cents in where appropriate. But I want to get right to it if we can, and start with Asha. So Asha, in your role at GEMS, how have you seen the pandemic affect the education industry?
The pandemic has not only affected GEMS, I'm looking at pandemic affecting education worldwide in 190 countries. Almost 94% of the students have been affected in one way or the other. And I think in countries that are in the poverty line, which is lower, I think almost 99%, we're going to have an impact which we've not seen. It's going to set back student learning and progress in dramatic ways. And as a result, it's going to impact higher education and the industry in ways that we haven't yet fully realized. I see schools being merged. I see a lot of population leaving the UAE for their home countries, and a lot of school closures are being seen. And I think the industry as education sector has responded in terms of being innovative, trying to respond as quickly as possible with different kind of packages. They're coming with distance learning, teachers are being skilled up, an alternate solution is being provided. But we need to do much more in terms of upskilling teachers, in providing greater equity to children who do not have accessibility to this remote learning program. Ours is a mid-market school, which where it looks at the lower end of the economic strata in UAE. And many of my students may not have, each of them may not have a laptop, to be able to access. So if you have a house with 4 children, you'll definitely have a problem of having 4 laptops because their timetables run simultaneously. So the school is trying to give old laptops which are in good conditions free of cost to them, so that equity is maintained and accessibility is maintained. But this is just the immediate reaction to the situation. How well this is being done and how effective progress is, only time will tell. Whether this form of education, there's plenty to learn. It's very variable in nature from school to school and from institution to institution. As schools like ours, which have transitioned to a digital learning 9 years ago, we moved in quite seamlessly. But in other schools where the transition was sudden, it's been very disruptive.
And so, Melanie, I want to move to you a second. You've done a lot of work on integrating sustainability into education and into the curriculum. How have you seen the pandemic shift some of the trends that you were seeing before COVID-19?
Gosh, John, it has certainly had a major impact. I think for me, we were on a huge trajectory before the pandemic kicked in. So we launched Educate Global we created the Climate Change Teacher course, which was originally accredited by the UN. And Asha was one of our very first head teachers and she was the first school in the world where every teacher was an Educate Global Climate Change teacher accredited by the UN. And we were just going up, 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 up. We were spreading out to, in 9 months, 329,000 schools in 43 countries. And all of a sudden, the pandemic came in and boom, it was almost like everything just stopped. It was like we were moving in slow motion with this like sound. I can liken it to one of those Jim Carrey films where he's got all those funny facial expressions. And we had head teachers contacting us saying, what do we do? Our engagement has fallen off a cliff. What, you know, how do we were busy developing blended learning packages to support our Educate Global Award schools, to support these teachers that had now done our training. And we pivoted within a matter of days. And we had a huge response. One area in Derbyshire, we put mini climate readers, which is a package that Asha was trialing for us in the UAE. And that we shifted on to parents delivering with teachers introducing it every week. That was a huge success. And we've now developed a further 7 packages like that, so that it's going to be a lot easier for those parents and teachers to deliver that at home. But we had an interesting discussion yesterday with Asha, which is something that I've been working on in the background, is the teachers that came on at the beginning now want to go that one step further. They want a further accreditation. So we've been working with Durham University and and Yale and Imperial College London, and we are looking at developing, we've got 3 assessment toolkits for SDGs that we're working on, and we're looking at a degree course, but more of that later, because I'm going to be tapping into your knowledge, John, before the day is over. It has been a very interesting experience. I personally have been able to go away and do more training. You know, me, I'm just like, okay, right, I need to go and find new ways, new methods of engagement. How do we use this digital system that we have now stepped into, and how do we go further? So it's been an interesting learning curve. It's been a reset, but by no means a halt. It's now full steam ahead to the next level, and to bring millions of teachers into this system. So like Asha's school, every school is a sustainability and climate change lead teacher. We need that in every school in the world. That's where we're going.
Thanks for that, Melanie. So to shift back to Asha a second, have you found that students have been more or less receptive to some of the sustainability and climate change things that you've rolled out in your classrooms since the pandemic?
The climate change courses were already embedded after we had upskilled our teachers. But what has happened during the pandemic is we were running several programs like Plant a Legacy, where children were going out and planting garth trees in the desert. And we had committed to planting 15,000 trees every year. And when the pandemic hit, immediately the students were like, now, are we going to do this Plant a Legacy thing anymore? And they came up with a solution that if they can't plant trees here physically because they can't go out, they are now engaging with a climate change activist in India. Her name is Lissy Priya Kangujam. She's 8 years old, and she is championing this in India. So it's her birthday on October 2nd, which happens to be Mahatma Gandhi's birthday as well, which we celebrate in the school. So tying it together, we're going to continue it virtually. Children are going to reach out to people in different countries through this virtual platform and say, plant a tree, plant a legacy as a gift, as a birthday gift to Lissy Priya, because we want to collaborate and champion the cause. So this new platform has become exciting because where children were collaborating locally with local Arabic schools and local special needs schools, they've suddenly found that the virtual platform can actually make them collaborate with everyone in the world. So in a way, we've had a relook at the way we can use this platform to embed climate literacy. But the biggest thing I find, which is a difficult point in climate literacy the world over, is there's no real curriculum for climate literacy. There's a curriculum for English, for math, for science, which has a progression, but there is no formal curriculum for climate literacy, which is a gradual progression right up to the grade 12. And that's what governments should be looking at. And that must be mandated in all of our schools, because climate literacy is not for a few of us to champion, for a few head teachers to talk about, for a few organizations. Education, climate literacy must become climate education. It's not enough to be literate. It is necessary to then transform the world through action by applying that learning in the context. So we're using the platform that is currently available. We don't want it to stall. We have also started another, which is going to come. It's called the World School Conference of Parties, Expo. It'll be the first time in the world that school children will debate and discuss climate change on a virtual platform. And we've extended it to schools in Costa Rica, in Australia, in India, Africa, and a large number of it is from the UAE. Because I think there are too many of us talking at webinars. We should give children an opportunity to be heard. We have to amplify their voices. They have to be heard. If there's a Lissy Priya change in India, I want hundreds and thousands of Greta Thunbergs, armies of them all over the world, changing the world. Yesterday, somebody told me the governments must take action. Yes, the governments must take action, but we can't wait for the governments alone. I think everybody owes it to the world and the planet that we live in to educate, to make them not just literate, but impassioned to change the world. So the pandemic did slow down the physical aspects of cleaning beaches and picking up plastic, but we've become more collaborative worldwide in raising awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So Melanie, I wonder if you could chime in on how you've dealt with creating climate literacy programs in your work.
Yes. John, what Asha says is absolutely spot on. We very early on, we knew that we needed a cross-curricular climate curriculum. And how we initially approached this was we said that we would thread it through the curriculum as if it was a golden thread, so that we would fit in with the existing curriculum, but integrate climate literacy into the curriculum. So for example, my favorite one is when we do maths, we do statistics, we can throw in the diminishing land mass in Bangladesh, and there's your statistics lesson. It's the same, you're still learning statistics, you're still learning in maths. But from what I've been seeing in the last few months, I think we need to go exactly as Asha is saying to me. Lesson plans do not cut the mustard. We've seen millions of lesson plans all over, and even we did. We thought, okay, we'll build a portal with lesson plans. We soon realized we needed more than that. So we developed an e-library, which is instantly translated into up to 54 languages. So, and there are thousands of items in there, which teachers can then integrate into the curriculum. But Asha is spot on. We need an actual climate curriculum, which starts from the age of 3 right through to 17, that then takes these children on. We have one school in Dubai, which the Westminster School, and they are doing something groundbreaking. They have year 4 and 5 children doing the very same UN courses that the teachers did, and then they have year 9 pupils are doing the introduction to the green economy course. So we are starting to introduce those UN courses to the teachers, and then in the next year we are starting to integrate that within the curriculum so that the children can do it. But you can't teach a UN course that is meant for an adult to a 3-year-old. So that is why we've been building these other blended learning packages, e-packages. We've just developed something called the Carbon Footprint Buster Challenge, and Asha's school and the other schools that are Educate Global Award schools, they will start championing that around the world. So it has to be tangible. You have to be doing something that you are delivering an action yourself. You have to be measuring your own carbon footprint before you can start going into a business and doing a sustainability assessment in that business. It's a fascinating introduction to everything, but we are onto something that is so exciting You know, all day I'm like bristling with energy, just thinking, I just can't wait. I can't wait for these kids to be doing this stuff. And they're taking it. The teachers are messaging me on WhatsApp saying, can we start? And I say, yeah, but I've only got the introduction. You know, I'm nearly there. Yesterday I was sent an entire course by a professor, and he just said, yeah, this is 6 years of my life, take this course. And I was like, okay, what must I do with it? I looked at it and I thought, this is fantastic. And it was all about teaching children how to disseminate fake news, fake, you know, climate denial, how to counteract climate denial arguments. And I thought, okay, well, that's great, that's a new course, we'll give that to the children. It is the way forward, but first we've got to concentrate on getting the teachers on board. We need to be working with all institutions. We need to get every single school, it has to become law that every school has a sustainability and climate change leadership team sanctioned by the head teacher or the principal. They nominate that leader with the support team, and then we look at mapping the curriculum and we start building this cross-curricular climate curriculum. Like Asha says, we can't just have climate literacy dotted around here and there. It has to be added into the curriculum. We don't have time to muck about. Sorry.
So no worries. So Asha, you talked a little bit about upskilling teachers, and you've had some success in your school with it. So I wonder, especially based on what Melanie just said, how your experience has been in upskilling teachers on the sustainability and climate change skills.
Yes, you know, when I started, I just saw a newspaper article which said that one of our teachers had become a climate change teacher, and I never knew there was something called a climate change teacher at that point. And it was just curiosity whetted during vacation, and I said, let me just do the course myself, because I always believe as a head teacher, I must experience it before I inflict it on anybody else in the school. So I did the course and I found it to be very useful. I found that I learned a lot about climate literacy. There were case studies from all over the world. There was interactive quizzes. And my idea of what is global warming and carbon footprint was so basic. I was quite ashamed that as a head teacher, I am leading an institution with very little knowledge about it. So I sent out the link to my teachers during the vacation, and I just waited. And from tens, it became hundreds of teachers who were showing an interest. And I really realized that everybody wanted to know more about the climate. And so I met with Melanie and Denise online, and I told them my teachers are very excited about this. And I threw it open to everybody. And I said, you know what? I think Melanie's struggling to put one teacher in every school. We've already got hundreds. How about all of you becoming climate change teachers? And what I was interested in is, it's not just the teachers. I have the manager of school operations who's done the course. I have my accounts officer who's done the course. When everybody buys into a way of life, it's not just about upskilling teachers, it's about embodying what we've learned. So we have the people walking around creating gardens, and children are talking about bringing butterflies into the garden. What kind of flowers should we plant to draw in butterflies? We have the bees, we have the birds. So they're actually they're living the climate change actions. So, and that's only possible if the accounts officer does the course and realizes we need money for transforming the school in the manner that we did. So we didn't stop with that. We made the parent governors on our governing body to the course. And so we moved from being just skilled to deliver a curriculum to actually living and breathing it, because our children should see this is the difference between literacy and being educated. We give them the opportunity. Everyone uses the same language, understands why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's the way forward, that the entire communities have to change. You know, this is a systemic change I'm talking about. It's like uprooting everything that's there, because the old way of learning and the old way of thinking is intractable and embedded in our system. If you want a systemic change, you've got to take it out by the roots and throw it out and start growing a new kind of vision. And that was only possible when I didn't leave any remnants. So I looked at the parent community, the administration, the teaching staff, the students, and we've all bought into that vision. And that is the template I want replicated in every school in the UAE and ultimately every school in the world.
So Melanie, I wonder if you could just talk about your experience with dealing with teacher training and some of the challenges that you've seen.
John, when I first presented the idea to the director of Planet at the UN, I said to him, my background, I'm a handwriting specialist. I created a handwriting scheme, and I knew that I needed to create an assessment toolkit, and then I knew then that I had to create a specialist teacher training. And that was my background, that was my experience. And I met with Angus Mackay at the UN, and I said, look, we can't just give lesson plans to teachers. We've got to upskill them. They have to be the creme de la creme. They have to really understand the material and the content and the concepts. And he said to me, no, it's not possible. We've done research on this. And I think he thought I would go away. And he said, well, try it in 80 schools in the United Kingdom. Have a template. I think he thought, oh, well, you know, this lady will go away. She'll leave me alone. And we took the UN. There were these courses that were on a platform which were meant for developing country governments. And I said, okay, I'm going to choose 5 of those, and that is going to be the first iteration of what we will do. And there was an explosion. First, John, nothing happened. We launched on the 22nd of April and nobody came. I had to learn how to use Twitter direct messaging. And I was direct messaging teachers saying, please, you've got to do this. I had one head teacher say to me, if you do not leave me alone, I'm going to report you for harassment. And she came back and she said, okay, I tell you what, you know, if you stop bothering me, I will do just one of these. And that evening at 6 o'clock, I'll never forget that evening, because I was standing in the pharmacy waiting for something for my mother, and my phone went, and she said, you won't believe what happened. I did all 5. And she said, I closed the door. I started on the first one. She said, I just could not. And I knew then that there was going to be something, there was a shift. And she posted her certificates of participation on Twitter. And then we had Dr. Ben King who joined, Dr. Meryl Batchelder, and they started pushing it out. And then Asha came, and everything changed with Asha, everything. Because I remember that meeting with her on Zoom, and she said, I'm going to get all my teachers to do this. And I said, I went back to Denise, I said, I don't think that's going to happen. But anyway, you know, I tell you what, my team were going, Melanie, they're coming. It's all coming in. And when 327 teachers had to be accredited, even the UN was saying, how did you do this? It spread very quickly, John. Within 9 months, we had 329,000 schools. And that was when Asha and I, we went to COP25 in Madrid, and we sat there. We were so lucky. We were given, I think we were given 8 press conferences, 8 live press conferences. That just doesn't happen. And we told everybody about it. And we started getting letters of intent from countries, Zimbabwe, Uganda. That's been the most interesting part. These countries want it, but they're asking us to support it financially because they cannot afford it. And they're saying, how can we cover the administration costs? If it's just £300 for each school to do the Bronze Award, how do we get on? So that's the next step for us. I think we need to be working, collaborating with the WGEO, with yourselves, with the universities, and taking that next step with the Pearl Initiative, and now spreading globally so that we can make this go out into every single school. There are thousands of schools that are signing up that want it, but then they're saying, how can we afford it? Because there is an administrative cost to it. Even though we're a not-for-profit organization, there are individuals in the UN team and our team, you know, it's time consuming. I think I'm so positive about what is coming in. We put out an ad just on social media. The British Council are sponsoring 2,000 UK schools to partner with 2,000 LDCs. Those 4,000 places were taken up within just under 48 hours. I've never seen anything like it. And that was just, you just don't get that sort of response from an LDC country. Uganda, they were just sending thousands of schools to fill in that form. So we know that the appetite is there. It's definitely gone past the 80, the 80 schools in the UK. It's now thousands around the world. And we look at the response of leadership teams. Look at GEMS. GEMS have now, Asha is the director of climate change learning for all of the GEMS group. So it started with that head teacher that had the vision to get every teacher in her school accredited, every teacher trained up and upskilled. And then she is now raised and elevated to that position because they can see she knows what she's talking about. She's actually delivered it. She's walking the walk and talking the talk. But we need more Ashas. We need a lot more Ashas around the world. In every country, we need, in every region, we need an Asha. That's what we need. So if Asha can clone herself, please, that would be wonderful.
I think the pandemic and this virtual environment actually permits us to share and collaborate. We are actually on the world global showcase of 100 schools run by Vikas Pota during World Education Week between October 5th and 9th. And we've been given a day to showcase our best practice. And it's when I look at 100 schools showcasing their best practices, there's so much to learn from each other. The world has to stop competing country by country, region by region, school by school, and actually understand that the only way forward is through collaboration, genuine collaboration, which seeks to change your environment and eventually the world. So we have to create communities of innovation that will impact other communities, and like a ripple, it will spread out. The actions that my children do, however small and however tiny in their little ways, are having huge impacts which they don't realize around the world. And when you give children that ownership and that ability that we can change the world, we can get thousands of people to plant trees all over the world just by appealing. They actually wrote to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed saying ban plastic. And I said, don't let up. Maybe His Highness will hear you one day. But if you give in and you don't, you stop tweeting and you stop writing letters to him, he is the person who has a vision to change Dubai. But it may not be their voices that get heard, but you never know. So they are really believing that His Highness will one day see their letters and say that, okay, we're going to make entire Dubai plastic free. So they started that in their own classes. They stopped bringing plastic tiffin boxes. They actually banned the plastic bottles. So now they bring, metal tiffin boxes or something else, reusable things. They're actually living what they're asking, to be done. And every little action that we take gives them an opportunity to actually translate what they're learning in their lessons into action. So they started composting. They've got a Dulsco, which is a big waste management company in Dubai, has given us compost bins. Children have a fruit break. They take the fruit peels, they put it in the compost machine, they actually see it turning into compost, and then that compost is used in our garden patches around the school. So it's something when the community buys in, when organizations stop just doing CSR, but actually live sustainability, that the change will begin to happen. They have as much a responsibility as we have as educators, and the time has come now to stop just talking and to act, to actually get the organizations in. So when the Plant a Legacy, the last day when you came down with Hammersmith and Fulham Borough Council and Guardian, we had 40 organizations in Dubai coming together to plant GAF trees in the desert. And I told them, it shouldn't be about kneeling with children just for a camera, a photograph. It has to be genuine, it has to continue. And the more you engage with our children, you will have a pipeline of resilient, climate resilient children who know what the future is like. You can't suddenly make them climate literate in university. You need to start right down at the roots and create critical thinkers, create people who believe they have to save the planet, and it's our collective responsibility. So governments can't suddenly turn around and say everyone has to change their behaviors, everyone has to be indulging in driver Tesla, driver, get it charged, have things there because it sounds sustainable. But actually, it has to be a change which starts at the roots and grows climate resilient children, leaders into universities and then into industry. That's how we can change the world.
John?
So, yeah, go ahead,
Sorry.
Melanie.
What has been so interesting, what Asha is saying here, we've been approached by the Saudi government, and we're now sort of in very far gone talks with them. They want to deliver the Educate Global Awards in every school. So we're talking a rollout of 35,000 schools, and they're saying, can you do like 10,000 schools a week until you have all 35,000 up and running? So it's just about looking at how we can do it using the technology we have, just as we're doing now. We can be rolling this out with schools like Asha's schools. Those teachers need to be mentors. So it's about with the ones that have already joined us, they will mentor those next groups coming up. And then and like Asha says, we start from young, we move up and we take this all the way up to a university degree, a master's, PhD, throughout.
I mean, I think that's great. I want to get to some of the questions, mostly because Rawad Masood had a couple of questions for Melanie. And one of the points that Rawad makes is really great, which is that they did a competition and had great turnout in Lebanon about reducing carbon footprint. But the question is more general about how do you account for these differences in emission factors between countries when you're actually doing the training or you're running the competitions or you're dealing with these students. And it's something we talked about earlier on an earlier call. Is how do you deal with the fact that many different countries have very wide experiences? So some of the countries you mentioned, at least developed.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for that question. So what we've been looking at as part of Educate Global within our Gold Awards, we are going to be teaching children and their teachers how to set up their very own media centers. Because your experience in one country, the experience in Uganda and UAE, Dubai, is completely different. So we need to start learning and sharing, as Asha said, we need to collaborate globally. It's one thing for children to write a handwritten letter, which I think is awesome as a handwriting specialist, to the king. We need these children to become confident media broadcasters. They need to start looking at their data, measuring their data, their own personal carbon footprint data. They need to be trained to go and do sustainability assessments of businesses and other homes and industries themselves. The children need to collaborate with business, and then they are going to be taught how to write press releases, how to have their very own radio stations, their very own TV news broadcast centers. We are going to be setting up the very first one in Dubai within the next few weeks. That is with Vijaya Kumari's school, the Westminster School. They're also a GEM school with Jyoti as their sustainability and climate change lead teacher there. And they are very keen to start seeing how that is going to develop. We need these centers, every school. John, when you turn every school into a PR and a marketing broadcast center, you can start sharing your data, your information, so that there are so many researchers and people doing PhDs out there. This data is gold, but how do they get to it unless it is shared? So I see children becoming media specialists, PR and marketing media specialists that take their climate literacy and their knowledge and their carbon footprint data and start promoting that and sharing that globally. I think that's how we're going to start seeing what one country's experience is completely different. We know that in the United Kingdom, we are unsustainable. We are writing checks that our planet cannot cash. There's just no way. And then we start talking about, but it's those poor countries over there, they're having too many children. So why don't we start listening? Why don't we start listening to their data, and we give them our data, and then we start thinking and saying, okay, you've got a point here. It's the only way we're going to know. Chair.
So Asha, I wonder if I could ask you, there's such a focus on climate change, which is only one of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the UN said repeatedly that all these things are connected to one another. So you can't address climate change without addressing women's inequality. You can't address climate change without addressing poverty. How difficult is that, or easy is that argument to make? And how difficult is it to put that to the teachers and the students on a regular basis to keep them engaged?
You know, this sustainable development goals are actually knit into the curriculum because of the, how interconnected things are. And you're right in saying that you can't teach climate change without talking about poverty, without talking about gender equality, without talking about access to education. The pandemic has actually set back the progress towards those SDGs. And I don't think in 2030 we're going to meet all of those SDGs. However, we can't despair. What we have done, we provide, if your curriculum is only what is dictated by a board, then it's not a holistic curriculum. According to me as an educator and in GEMS, what we're trying to do is to allow the curriculum to evolve from what is happening around you. So if you take up that my children study about the climate and weather, but they also study about cloud seeding, which happens in this region. They study about the impact of, the lack of water, the conservation of water, why it's important in this region. And through, a problem-based study, they're coming to learn about all of the content they would have encountered in science and math and English by studying those particular problems that are relevant. And when you study water conservation, you also study about children who have to carry water over long distances because they're poor. And children are motivated, and our school has actually donated to Dubai Cares for the last 10 years. And we were the first and the only school to be recognized by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of Dubai, for having given and built schools in countries like Malawi and in Syria and in Palestine. Every time there is an occasion to donate, our children have also learned about tolerance and generosity on the curriculum. Because tolerance and generosity, like when you're saying about cause and effect, if you're not tolerant and generous towards nature itself, you can't maintain the planet. So connections are made because it's so organic. Anything you touch in terms of SDG goals makes an impact somewhere else. So if our children are looking at saving the planet, they're also learning to be tolerant. They're looking at helping somebody else. They're learning about generosity. They're learning about inclusion, about being at peace. They study what is happening in different regions of the world. Why is it that there is no water in Africa? Is it naturally brought about, or is there something we can do to help? So in putting climate change in the curriculum, it's just a start point where you can touch upon all the SDG goals, or you can take any other SDG goals and connect it to climate change. They're so interwoven. We can't make a change in one direction without touching another one. If we have to collaborate, we have to be at peace. If we have to have, countries can't be at war and then say there is poverty arising out of war. So when children had to donate blankets to Syria, and they had to understand what's happening in Syria, what is happening in the Middle East, where there is, this strife, and why they have to pack blankets to send across to another country. So we're talking about weather there, how cold it is in Syria in the winters. But at the same time, we're saying the context of Syria during that time is war-torn. And therefore, you're learning about peace, maintaining peace, collaborating. Actually, children know a lot more, are more empathetic than adults. Somewhere, as we school them and as they enter the world, I don't know where they pick up, being biased, being prejudiced. As young children, they're so full of hope, so full of positivity and optimism that if we given the right kind of situations and right kind of focus by teachers and schools, I think all human beings have inherent goodness, and we can teach them to live in peace and harmony. That's what it's meant to be. So we're taking SDGs, climate change. Through climate change, we're actually visiting all of the SDGs that we can.
Mm-hmm. John, it's an interesting concept because we're working with Imperial College London at the moment with Dr. Vasiliki Kiyupi on a toolkit to assess, are we teaching the SDGs in a way that is proactive and positive? Are we achieving that? Are the children absorbing the knowledge and the understandings of the SDGs? So, and then we've looked at the toolkit and said, you have to have an SDG specialist teacher training. You can't just expect to assess and then think, okay, well now, have we achieved what we should be achieving? We need to train teachers how to teach the SDGs. It's something that Asha and I were speaking about at COP25. I know we were running around trying to get the little badges. You got the badge, Asha. I didn't get one. They still owe me one. So it's upskilling teachers. It's about having this army of teachers. You know, when we came over to Dubai, we came through with The Guardian. The Guardian did a visual feature. They followed us for a week. And it was launched on the first day of COP25. It was called the Army of Gretas. You can go and have a look at it. And they show how we go into Asha's school and what those children are achieving and what we can achieve throughout the world. But the key is teachers. The key is upskilling teachers to be specialists in a particular field and continuously upgrading that training so that they can deliver what needs to be delivered. They are the magic ingredient. We ignore that at our peril.
So I've just sent the link for everybody so everybody can see the video that Melanie's talking about after the webinar. So okay, so now we move into some challenging territory. We've talked separately from this webinar. We've talked a lot about assessment, and I wonder, Asha, if you can start just by indicating what you think some of the challenges are about assessing climate knowledge, but also just assessing sustainability knowledge. So how do we make sure that we're actually graduating students who have the right skills and the right knowledge?
Assessing, especially in the pandemic, is definitely proving to be a challenge because assessments are difficult to conduct in terms of its reliability, its validity when you're doing it in a remote fashion. But assessments, I think, have to evolve. It has to go beyond paper pen tests. It has to go beyond standardized tests to actually understanding, if children are able to translate their learning into application within the classroom and on projects or something that they undertake. Our assessments are always a mark or a grade. If we stopped assessing it with a mark or a grade, but assessed how well somebody has done or how well someone has been able to translate or present something, an assessment can be a paragraph of, this person was able to do this and what benefit it has to society or to the school or to the environment. What we assess is what we're showing we value. And so we must assess more often what students are really capable of. If it's about meeting a score, then teachers tend to, cater to that assessment, teach to the test. Organizations begin to value the graphs and the data that comes out in terms of letter grades and numbers. And I know that hundreds of thousands of children have gone through in my 60 years of age. I've been teaching for the last 33 years. And I find that it's not the marks that you gain. It's the values that children learn. It's when you talk to alumni, they recall how they felt in school, what opportunities you gave them, how they discovered they were talented in music or in art, or how you made a debater out of them, or you gave them the ability to communicate. No one tells us you did a great English lesson. I remember your history lesson. So what I want for us to understand is that assessments should build up skills in children, not content, not just knowledge that you can get at any time. It should build values in children. If your heart and head are in the right place, then the actions that follow will be the right ones. We should look at skill building, improving skills. And in a sense, I would like to put young students with older children, because I believe in that concept of mentorship and mastery. You become a master craftsman when you can work along with people who know the craft. So I would look at university students being placed in industries. They have to intern. Industries have to work very, very closely with universities and allow them to come in and say, this is what I do as a scientist. This is what you do as a doctor, before pushing children into professions. So when industry aligns itself and becomes like a mentor, a guardian, and they complain, they say, we don't get the kind of people we're looking for. Assessments then should happen outside in those industries. They should give a report back to the university saying, this is what the child is capable of. A similar kind of setups can happen in schools, where you engage in projects with older children and somebody is assessing how well he or she can communicate, how well he or she can construct, how they can design, how they can ideate. That is what should be taught. That should be assessed. But we assess how much did you get in grammar? Did you know your adverb and adjective? And did you get your photosynthesis process correct? Nobody cares. But what should be assessed is, have I left the children with skills? Have I upskilled them to be resilient? Are they persevering? Are they empathetic? Have I given them the right values? So if we don't assess those, and they're very difficult to assess in a context of a classroom, but it can be assessed in situations and in association with industries or other places. We just put a letter grade even for moral education, and you say he got a D in moral education, he got an A, and most often it's a comprehension passage where you say, yeah, you got to be kind. But if you haven't given an opportunity to be kind, you don't know what you're doing. So assessments have to modify, and it's not easy. It's a systemic change again. It depends on the boards, it depends on universities. As long as employers keep saying, I want an MBA, you're going to have somebody study for MBA. Stop asking for the MBA. Start looking for the skills. Then you will find the skills are valued and assessed.
So Asha, you actually answered what was going to be my last question, so I can pose this now to Melanie, which is, with about 6 minutes left, what do you think the role is for the private sector in this conversation? So a lot of our schools are either nonprofits or governmentally sponsored. We do have some for-profit institutions, but what do you think? And Asha's answered this to a certain extent, so Melanie, I'll pose it to you first. What do you think the role is for the private sector in this conversation?
It's absolutely indelibly linked. The private sector has got to link within education. We need businesses to partner with schools. Every business in every town, in every region, in every county, country, wherever they are, every state needs to find a school local to them and partner with them, so that they can start teaching the children what they, their values and what they want to be looking out for. And the children can go in and assess those companies and start seeing what is required. They can start learning. It's a mentorship again. We were talking before we started this mission, this webinar, about the funding of education globally, where we need business and individuals to step up to the mark and to sponsor and fund a school. Don't just think, oh well, I'm going to give you some money and that's it, you're going to leave me alone. They need to partner. They need to have a long-term strategy saying, that's my school, I'm sponsoring that school, we're working together as one team, and we are going to be looking at the skills that we have to share with that school, and that school is going to share their knowledge and their skills to ensure that we are better. I recently did the Al Gore climate reality training, leadership training, and I was incredibly blessed to be put with an accountability group that were all CEOs of mega corporations around the world. And the one thing that every one of them kept asking me was, how can we get this into schools? How can we work with you? And I was saying to them, partner with schools and organizations like ours. Go and connect with them. Let's see how we can, it's like building a wall. I was saying to my husband, we were walking the dog, yes, I said, I'm going to build a wall, a virtual wall. And he said, I do not know what you are speaking about, Mel. I said, I'm going to find all of those schools that have signed up, the ones that weren't lucky enough to get the funding from the British Council and the other agencies, and I'm going to put every principal's name and where they are, and I'm going to ask a business to sponsor and partner with each one of those bricks in that wall. Each brick is a school, and to build that wall around the world, the only way we can do that is a partnership with business, industry, corporations, SMEs, and individuals. Even entrepreneurs like myself, I could quite easily give 3 hours a week of my time and some funding to a school in my local area. It just takes one, and that will transform what we need quickly. We need to get into, there are 100 million teachers in the world, John. We need to upskill those 100 million teachers within the next 12 months. From what I've been learning with climate reality and the training that I'm doing with Durham University, we need these skills out there now. We do not have time to wait and waste. So let's roll our sleeves up and every single one of us take responsibility. We can't just say, oh, well, we're going to leave that to the government. Oh, somebody else will do that. There was something on the BBC where a father said, oh, it's too late for me. I'm in Siberia. Yes, the permafrost is melting. I'll leave it to my children and my grandchildren to fix and sort out. No, no, no. Every single one of us, and it starts now, it starts today, and it's organizations like, it's working with the Pearl Initiative, the WGO, UN Global Compact, working with the likes of GEMS and ASHES, that is how it's going to be done. Business, industry, mentors, partnership. Let's do it. When do we start, John?
Now.
I think we're going to start right afterwards. We're basically done with the call. So I'd like to thank Melanie and Asha for taking the time out today, and obviously to the Pearl Initiative, the Global Compact Network UAE, and WeGeo for sponsoring the event and for promoting it through their channels. I think we heard a lot of great strategies today for engaging with youth, for engaging in the schools. I hope those of you who are in the private sector who are on the call saw that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into this, and that there is a place for you. What we need are not just resources, though, right? So we're not just monetary resources. There's also a need for you to help out in any way that you can. So we have serious educators working on the problem, but we can't do it alone. So thanks everybody for your time here today. All of our contact information should be available. I know that I'm sure Melanie and Asha are more than happy to keep contact with everybody. But again, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn with us more about youth engagement for regional success. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Asha. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We'll see you on the other side.
Bye-bye, everybody.